Laura Hayes stood in the observation chamber, her hands pressed against the transparent aluminum viewport. Below her, holographic projectors displayed the death of candidate number 217. The creature had been massive, nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms and natural armor plating that could deflect plasma rounds. It had survived exactly 47 minutes in the Krothak Preserve before the Void Stalkers found it. The playback showed the creature's final moments in clinical detail. It had run, crashed through the jungle undergrowth with all the grace of a falling meteor. The stalkers had flanked it, their 6-legged forms moving like liquid shadow through the bioluminescent trees. When they struck, it was over in seconds. The hologram froze on the final frame, then dissolved into statistical data. Time survived, 47 minutes, 12 seconds. Cause of termination, massive trauma to primary cardiovascular systems. Turn it off, Ambassador Preston said quietly. The human diplomat looked tired, older than his 50 years. He had been trying to talk Laura out of this for 3 weeks. The Galactic Council's survival board sat in a semicircle behind them. 12 species, 12 sets of eyes watching Laura with expressions that ranged from pity to barely concealed contempt. High Adjudicator Thane, a being that looked like someone had crossed a mantis with a stone pillar, leaned forward on his observation platform. Dr. Hayes, Thane's voice came through the translator with a sound like grinding gravel. You have reviewed all 217 previous attempts. You understand that 0 candidates have survived this trial. 0. Not the Kresh with their regenerative capabilities. Not the Thorian battle forms bred specifically for hostile environments. Not even the synthetics who feel no fear and require no sleep. Laura turned from the viewport. She was small by human standards, barely 165 centimeters, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her hands were calloused from years of field work, and her eyes held the kind of patience that came from watching tide pools for hours, waiting for the right moment to observe behavior that happened only once in a lifetime. I understand, she said simply. Then you understand this is suicide, Preston interjected. Laura, please. Command has already approved 3 other candidates. Special Forces operatives with enhanced genetics and combat experience. Let them. They withdrew their applications yesterday, Laura interrupted. I checked. After watching candidate 215, they decided the risk was unacceptable. She looked at Preston with something that might have been sympathy. They were soldiers, Preston. They looked at the Predator trial and saw an enemy they couldn't defeat. I'm a biologist. I look at it and see an ecosystem. One of the council members, a flowing mass of tentacles in a containment suit, burbled something that the translator rendered as laughter. An ecosystem that consumes everything we send into it. The Krothak Preserve houses specimens from 47 death worlds, Dr. Hayes. Apex predators that have evolved over millions of years to kill. You study fish. I study predators, Laura corrected. Great whites, orcas, box jellyfish, cone snails. I've spent 15 years learning how the deadliest creatures in Earth's oceans think, how they hunt, how they survive. She paused. And I've spent my whole life learning from someone who survived in Earth's deadliest jungles for 2 years straight. Preston's expression shifted. Walter. Your grandfather. Laura nodded. He was a reconnaissance specialist in the Vietnam conflict. Dropped behind enemy lines with nothing but basic gear and expected to survive in jungle that killed trained soldiers every day. Not from combat. From the environment itself. From tigers and snakes and insects and plants that could kill you with a touch. And this helps you how? Thane asked. The Krothak Preserve makes your grandfather's jungle look like a garden park. Maybe, Laura acknowledged. But Grandpa Walter taught me something that all those battle forms and enhanced soldiers never learned. She met Thane's multifaceted eyes. He taught me that the deadliest place to be is wherever you don't belong. And he taught me how to belong. The council chamber fell silent. Laura could hear the soft hum of the environmental systems, the distant pulse of the station's massive engines. Preston was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Explain, Thane commanded. Every candidate who entered that preserve went in as an invader, Laura said. They brought weapons, armor, technology. They fought the environment. Fought the predators. And the preserve killed them for it because that's what ecosystems do to invaders. They reject them. She pulled up her own holographic display, showing footage of candidate 189, a Kresh warrior. Look at this one. It had active camouflage, energy shields, and enough firepower to level a building. It died in 32 minutes because every predator in a 5-kilometer radius detected its technology and came to investigate the threat. The council members shifted, their attention focusing. Grandpa Walter survived by becoming part of the jungle, Laura continued. He learned to read the environment, to understand what the predators were telling him through their behavior, to move with the ecosystem instead of against it. She smiled slightly. He used to say the jungle talks if you're willing to listen. I think the Crothak Preserve is probably very chatty. This is insane, Preston muttered. Laura, you're talking about primitive survival techniques against creatures that have killed the galaxy's finest warriors. I'm talking about techniques that kept humans alive for 200,000 years before we invented warriors, Laura replied. And I'm betting that nothing in that preserve has ever encountered a human who knows how to disappear into an environment. Thane was silent for a long moment. Then he gestured to his data terminal. The trial parameters are simple, Dr. Hayes. You will be provided with a basic survival kit. No weapons. A standard environmental suit for atmosphere processing. Emergency beacon in case you choose to forfeit, though activation constitutes failure. You must survive in the preserve for 72 hours. That is all. 72 hours, Laura repeated. And if I survive? Then humanity will have passed the predator trial, Thane said. Full council membership will be granted. But I must be clear, Dr. Hayes. We do not expect you to survive. This conversation is a formality. The medical team is already prepared for body recovery. Laura looked back at the viewport, at the green hell rotating slowly below the station. Somewhere in that jungle, predators were hunting. Somewhere in that tangle of alien vegetation and hostile biology, there was a pattern, an ecosystem. A way to survive if she could just learn to read it fast enough. She thought of Walter, of quiet evenings on his porch while he taught her to identify bird calls and track deer through autumn leaves. The jungle talks if you listen, he had said. And if you learn its language, it might just let you live. When do I go in? Laura asked. Thane's mandibles clicked in what might have been respect. Transport departs in 1 hour. May your species gods show you mercy, Dr. Hayes, because the Crothak Preserve will not. Laura turned away from the viewport and walked toward the preparation chambers. Behind her, Preston called her name, but she did not look back. She had 1 hour to prepare for an environment that had killed every creature the galaxy had sent against it. 1 hour to remember everything Walter had taught her. 1 hour before she descended into the green hell and proved that humanity's oldest survival skills were its greatest weapon. The transport sphere deposited Laura onto the jungle floor with a soft thud, then immediately rocketed back toward orbit. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the jungle came alive with sound. Laura froze, her boots sinking slightly into the mossy ground. The air was thick, humid, pressing against her skin like a warm, wet cloth. Her environmental suit was processing the atmosphere, filtering out the toxic spores and excess carbon dioxide, but she could still smell it. Rich earth, rotting vegetation, and something else. Something sharp and predatory that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. A cry echoed through the canopy above her. It started low, almost like a purr, then rose into a shriek that made her teeth ache. Off to her left, something answered. Then something else behind her. 3 distinct calls, 3 different positions, forming a triangle around her location. They were already hunting her. Laura's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to find cover, to do something. She forced herself to remain absolutely still. Walter's voice echoed in her memory, calm and steady even after all these years. First rule, Laura girl. When you land somewhere new, you stop and you listen. The jungle will tell you everything you need to know if you don't panic. She closed her eyes and listened. The calls were getting closer, tightening the triangle. She could hear movement now, the soft rustle of something large moving through the undergrowth with disturbing quiet. The monitoring drones overhead hummed faintly, recording every moment for the council observers. They were probably already writing her obituary. Laura opened her eyes and looked around. The jungle was unlike anything on Earth, but it was still a jungle. Massive trees with bark that glowed faintly blue in the dim light. Vines thick as her thigh hanging between them. The undergrowth was dense, a tangle of ferns and broad-leafed plants that pulsed with bioluminescence. And everywhere, the smell of life and death mixing together. She noticed the birds first. At least they looked like birds. Small flying creatures with leathery wings perched in the trees around her. They were all facing the same direction, away from her, their heads cocked at identical angles. Listening to something. Watching something. Laura turned slowly, following their gaze. 50 meters ahead, the vegetation changed. The glowing plants stopped abruptly, replaced by darker growth with thick waxy leaves. And the birds, she realized, were staying away from that area. completely away. Another cry closer now. Laura saw movement through the trees to her right. Something big, low to the ground, moving with the fluid grace of a hunting cat. She caught a glimpse of chameleonic skin shifting colors to match the jungle floor. 6 legs. A void stalker just like in the briefing files. Her hand moved to her survival kit. No weapons, but she had a small cutting tool. She could make a spear, maybe fashion some kind of defensive. No. Walter's voice again. Warriors fight. Survivors adapt. Know which one you are before you make a choice you can't take back. Laura started moving. Not running. Walking steadily toward the darker vegetation, the area the birds avoided. Her boots made soft sounds on the jungle floor, but she kept her pace even. Behind her, she heard the stalker's movement shift, tracking her change in direction. The air changed as she approached the dark vegetation. The smell intensified, becoming almost medicinal. Sure. The kind of smell that warned away herbivores from toxic plants. Laura pulled out her scanner, a basic device that could analyze chemical compounds. It beeped softly as she waved it over the nearest plant with waxy leaves. The readout made her smile despite the terror singing through her veins. Alkaloid compounds. Terpenes. A chemical cocktail similar to certain earth plants that insects and animals instinctively avoided. Not because they were directly toxic to touch, but because predators had learned over generations that anything smelling like this was not food. Laura knelt and carefully cut several large leaves from the plant. The stalker was closer now. She could hear its breathing, a wet rasping sound that made her hands shake as she worked. 20 meters. Maybe less. She crushed the leaves between her palms, releasing their oils. The smell exploded around her, so strong it made her eyes water. She rubbed the crushed plant matter on her arms, her neck, her face. The environmental suit was already coated. She grabbed more leaves, stuffing them into her pockets, smearing the oils across her clothing. The stalker emerged from the tree line. Laura saw it fully for the first time. It was beautiful in a terrible way. Nearly 4 meters long, built like someone had crossed a panther with a lizard and added extra legs for stability. Its skin rippled with colors, matching the jungle so perfectly that it seemed to appear from nowhere. 6 yellow eyes focused on her with predatory intelligence. Laura stayed on her knees, moving slowly to smear more plant oils on her boots. She did not run. Did not make eye contact. Did not show fear. Just kept working, making herself smell like the toxic plants around her. The stalker approached, its head lowering to scent the air. Laura could see its nostrils flaring, taking in her new smell. It stopped 3 meters away and Laura's heart nearly stopped with it. Time stretched. The stalker circled her slowly, its 6 legs moving in perfect coordination. It was testing her, trying to understand what it was sensing. The chemical smell from the plants was overwhelming now, coating everything within a 5-meter radius. Then the stalker's head jerked back slightly. It made a sound, low and uncertain. Not the hunting cry from before. Something else. Confusion maybe. Or recognition that this prey smelled wrong. Smelled like poison. Smelled like something to avoid. The creature took a step backward. Laura kept working, crushing more leaves, layering the smell thicker. She moved to another plant nearby, this one with purple flowers that released a different but equally strong odor when she broke the stems. She mixed it with the first compound, creating a complex scent profile that her scanner indicated contained at least 7 different warning chemicals. The stalker watched for another long moment. Then it turned and melted back into the jungle, disappearing so completely that Laura wondered if she had imagined it. She waited, counting her heartbeats. 100. 200. The jungle sounds gradually returned. The bird creatures began moving again in the trees above. The hunting cries in the distance faded, moving away from her position. Laura released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her hands were shaking badly now, the adrenaline crash hitting her all at once. She sat back on her heels and looked at the plants surrounding her. The jungle talks, she whispered to herself. And predators listen. She spent the next hour collecting every plant from the safe zone she could identify as containing warning compounds. She filled her pack with leaves, stems, flowers, and roots. She found a stream nearby and tested the mud, discovering it was rich in minerals that carried scent strongly. Perfect for mixing with the plant oils. As the alien sun began to set, painting the jungle in shades of purple and green, Laura built her first shelter. Not a structure to hide in. Just a small clearing where she had layered the plant compounds so thickly that every predator passing by would smell danger and keep moving. She sat in her circle of chemical warnings and pulled out her recording device. Her voice was steady now, calm with the clarity that came from surviving the first few hours. Day 1 hour 6, she recorded. The Void Stalkers hunt by scent and thermal signature. But they're also smart enough to avoid things that smell like poison. Grandpa Walter was right. The jungle does talk. You just have to learn the language. She paused, looking out at the darkening jungle. And I think I'm starting to understand what it's saying. Laura had not moved in 6 hours. She sat cross-legged beneath a massive tree, covered head to toe in a thick paste of mud and crushed plants. The mixture had dried on her skin, cracking slightly when she breathed, but she remained perfectly still. To anyone watching, she looked like a statue. A piece of the jungle floor that had somehow taken human shape. Above her, in the orbital observation deck, the Galactic Council's military strategists were having an argument. "This is impossible," General Corthin insisted, his forearms gesturing at the holographic display. "She should be dead. The preserve has 17 distinct apex predator species in her sector. How is she still breathing?" Ambassador Preston leaned forward, studying the feed from the monitoring drones. Laura appeared as a heat signature on the infrared scan, but barely. The mud coating her body had cooled to match the ambient temperature of the jungle floor. On the chemical sensors, she registered as plant matter. Not prey. Not food. Just environment. "She's not hiding," Preston said slowly. "She's camouflaging. But not visually. She's doing it chemically." High Adjudicator Thane had been silent for the past hour, watching Laura's vitals on his private display. Heart rate slow and steady. Breathing controlled. No signs of panic or stress. The human had been motionless since dawn, and now the sun was setting again. 48 hours had passed. 48 hours longer than any candidate in the trial's history. "Explain what we are seeing," Thane commanded. A xenobiologist, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Vel, pulsed with light as it spoke. "The human has created a scent profile that mimics the jungle's toxic flora. She has layered at least 12 different plant compounds on her body. Some are alkaloid-based warnings. Others contain terpenes that predators associate with illness or poison. She smells, to any creature with chemical sensors, like something that will make them sick if they eat it. But she is not actually toxic," Corthin said. "No," Vel agreed. "She is lying. Chemically lying. And every predator in that jungle is believing the lie." On the screen, a pack of void stalkers emerged from the undergrowth. There were 5 of them, moving in perfect coordination. Their 6-legged forms flowed across the jungle floor like liquid shadow, heading directly toward Laura's position. The observation deck fell silent. Laura saw them coming. Her eyes, the only part of her not covered in mud, tracked their movement. The lead stalker was massive, easily the alpha of its pack. Its chameleonic skin shifted through colors as it moved, sampling the environment. It was hunting, following some scent trail that Laura could not detect. The pack passed within 3 meters of her. So close she could see the individual scales on their flanks, could hear the wet rasp of their breathing. The alpha paused, its head turning toward her. 6 yellow eyes focused on the mud-covered shape beneath the tree. Laura did not breathe, did not blink. She had become stone, become earth, become part of the jungle floor. The alpha stalker moved closer, its nostrils flaring as it scented the air around her. In the observation deck, Preston gripped the edge of his console. "Come on, Laura," he whispered. "Come on." The stalker's head lowered until it was centimeters from Laura's face. She could feel its breath, hot and rank, washing over her. Could see her reflection in its predatory eyes. Every muscle in her body screamed to move, to run, to do anything except sit here while a creature designed to kill examined her like a curious puzzle. Then the stalker sneezed. A violent, wet sound that sprayed mucus across Laura's mud coating. The creature shook its head, backing away from her with an expression that might have been disgust. It made a low growling sound to its pack, then moved on, giving Laura's position a wide berth. The pack followed their alpha, disappearing into the jungle as silently as they had arrived. Laura waited a full minute before she allowed herself to breathe normally. Her hands were shaking beneath the mud, but she smiled. The alpha had smelled the plant compounds and decided she was not worth investigating. Too risky. Too much chance of poison or illness. "Impossible," Corthin breathed in the observation deck. She made a void stalker pack retreat without moving. Without weapons. Without anything except mud and plants. "Not impossible," Thane corrected. "Simply unprecedented. The human is not surviving the jungle. She is becoming part of it." Laura used the last hours of daylight to improve her technique. She had been experimenting with different plant mixtures, testing which combinations created the strongest warning signals. She found that mixing the waxy-leafed plants with a particular type of fungus created a smell so intense that even the insect analogues avoided her. She also discovered something else. The mud from different areas of the jungle carried different scent markers. Mud from near predator dens smelled like the predators themselves. Territorial markers. She began collecting this mud carefully, storing it in sections of her environmental suit that she had cut away. The suit was useless for its original purpose now. She had repurposed it into carrying pouches for her chemical arsenal. As night fell, Laura moved for the first time in hours. She stood slowly, her joints protesting, and began walking through the jungle. Not randomly. She was following a pattern she had observed. The void stalkers had patrol routes, predictable paths they used when hunting. By coating herself in mud from their territorial markers and adding the plant compounds, she could walk those same paths without being challenged. She tested her theory carefully. A juvenile stalker encountered her on a game trail just after midnight. The young predator approached cautiously, its skin flashing with uncertain colors. Laura stood still, letting it scent her. The juvenile circled once, twice, then sat down and began grooming itself. Completely relaxed. Laura realized with amazement that the creature thought she was part of its territory. The mud carried its pack's scent. The plants made her smell like environment, not food. To the juvenile, she was just a strange rock formation that smelled vaguely like home. Laura carefully walked past the juvenile, which watched her go with mild interest before returning to its grooming. In the observation deck, the overnight shift had arrived. They reviewed the day's footage in stunned silence. A junior analyst finally spoke up, her voice uncertain. "Adjudicator Thane, we have a problem. The human has now survived 48 hours. This exceeds all previous records by more than 47 hours. The trial parameters only require 72 hours total. At her current survival rate, she will complete the trial successfully." Thane studied the holographic display where Laura was now systematically collecting samples from different areas of the preserve. She was not panicking. Not hiding. She was conducting research, gathering data, behaving like the scientist she claimed to be. "Update the council," Thane ordered. "Inform them that humanity may actually pass the predator trial." "On what basis?" Corthan demanded. "Superior technology? Enhanced genetics? Combat prowess?" "No," Thane said quietly. "On the basis of understanding ecology better than we do. The human is surviving because she is not fighting the preserve. She is integrating with it. Using techniques that appear to be thousands of years old, developed long before her species achieved spaceflight." Vel pulsed with curious light. "You mean primitive survival methods are proving more effective than our advanced combat training?" "I mean," Thane replied, "that we may have been testing for the wrong kind of survival all along. We tested for strength, for technology, for the ability to dominate a hostile environment. The human is showing us something different. The ability to become part of the environment. To adapt so completely that predators cannot distinguish her from the jungle itself." On the screen, Laura sat beside a stream and began mixing a new batch of mud and plant compounds. She was humming softly to herself, a tune that the translators could not identify. She looked relaxed, comfortable. At home in a jungle that had killed every other creature the galaxy had sent against it. 24 hours remaining, Preston said. "If she survives one more day, humanity gets full council membership." "If she survives," Thane agreed. "But I am beginning to think that is no longer an if. I think it is a certainty. And I think we need to understand how she is doing this because it changes everything we thought we knew about survival." Laura finished her mud mixture and applied it carefully to her skin. The jungle around her was alive with hunting calls and the sounds of predators moving through the night. But none of them came near her. She smelled wrong. Smelled like poison and territory markers and things that were not food. She smiled in the darkness and thought of Walter, teaching her to rub wild onions on her clothes to mask her scent from deer. "Same principle," she whispered. "Just a bigger jungle." Laura knelt beside the remains of Candidate 203. The bones had been picked clean, scattered across a small clearing in a pattern that told a story. She examined the scene with the detached curiosity of a scientist, recording everything on her handheld device. Subject 203 was a Kresh warrior, she spoke into the recorder, her voice calm and steady. Based on the weapon fragments, it came equipped with plasma rifles, energy shields and close combat blades. All top-tier military hardware. She picked up a piece of shattered energy shield, turning it over in her mud-caked hands. and it died within 2 hours of entering the preserve. She stood and walked the perimeter of the clearing, reading the signs. Claw marks on the trees, deep gouges that spoke of massive strength. Scorch marks on the bark where the plasma rifle had fired. Disturbed earth showing the pattern of a running retreat. The creche fought, Laura continued. It detected threats and responded with overwhelming force. Killed at least 2 void stalkers based on the blood residue here. She crouched beside a dark stain on the ground. But that was its mistake. Every shot fired, every shield activation, every act of aggression marked it as a threat. Not prey. A threat. And this jungle does not tolerate threats. She found evidence that at least 9 different predator species had converged on this location. They had not come to feed. They had come to eliminate a dangerous invader. The creche had become the most hunted thing in the jungle the moment it started fighting back. Laura looked up at the monitoring drones hovering overhead. "Are you watching this?" she asked. Every candidate who died here made the same mistake. They came as warriors. As conquerors. The jungle killed them for it. 18 hours remained in her trial. Laura had spent the last day doing something no other candidate had attempted. She was studying the preserve itself, treating it as a living research project instead of a death trap. Her pack was full of samples, carefully organized and labeled. Plant specimens. Soil from different areas. Even carefully collected predator scat that could tell her about their diet and health. She had also begun to understand the preserve's social structure. The void stalkers were the dominant predators, but they were not alone. There were the razorwings, flying hunters that nested in the canopy and hunted in coordinated flocks. The ground shakers, massive herbivores whose territorial disputes could level trees. And the shadows, creatures she had only glimpsed at night, moving through the darkness with such perfect stealth that even her trained eyes could barely track them. But more importantly, she had learned how they communicated. How they marked territory. How they warned each other of danger or signaled the presence of prey. Laura found a void stalker scent marker on a tree trunk. She examined it closely, then pulled out one of her mud mixtures. She had been refining this particular blend for hours, adding trace minerals and organic compounds to match the chemical signature of the stalker pack she had been observing. Carefully, she applied her mixture just below the natural marker. She was not trying to fool the stalkers. She was trying to speak their language. The message she was leaving was simple: safe passage. No threat. Part of territory. A rustle in the undergrowth made her turn. A juvenile stalker emerged, the same one she had encountered 2 nights before. It approached without fear, its chameleonic skin cycling through curious colors. Laura remained still, letting it investigate her scent. The juvenile touched her mud-covered leg with its nose, then looked up at the tree where Laura had placed her marker. It understood. It saw the marker, smelled Laura's matching scent profile, and made a decision. This strange 2-legged thing was part of the territory. Not food. Not threat. Just there. Laura slowly reached into her pack and pulled out a piece of dried meat from her survival rations. She had been saving it, not sure if she would need it. Now she made a choice. She tossed the meat to the juvenile. The young stalker caught it, examined it briefly, then consumed it in 2 quick bites. It made a pleased chirping sound, then sat down beside Laura like a domesticated pet. Laura smiled despite herself. "In the observation deck, they are probably losing their minds right now," she said softly. "A human feeding a void stalker. Sitting beside it like we are old friends." In fact, the observation deck was in chaos. General Corthin was demanding explanations that the xenobiologists could not provide. Ambassador Preston was laughing with something that sounded like hysteria. And High Adjudicator Thane was reviewing footage with an expression that might have been awe. "She is not surviving," Thane said quietly. "She is thriving. She has integrated so completely with the preserve's ecosystem that the predators treat her as a non-threatening part of the environment. This human has accomplished in 60 hours what we thought was impossible." Laura spent the next several hours conducting her research. She followed the juvenile stalker back to its den and observed the pack dynamics from a safe distance. She documented hunting behaviors, territorial disputes, and social hierarchies. She collected data that xenobiologists would study for decades. She also found more candidate remains. Each one told the same story. They had fought. They had run. They had tried to dominate or escape. And the jungle had killed them for it. Even the ones with superior technology and enhanced genetics. Especially those ones actually. The bigger the threat they posed, the more aggressively the preserve responded. Laura recorded her observations methodically. "The predator trial is not testing combatability," she concluded. "It is testing adaptability. the ability to understand and integrate with a hostile ecosystem. Every species that failed approached this as a battle. They never considered that survival might mean cooperation instead of conquest. As the final hours approached, Laura made her way toward the extraction point. She walked openly through the jungle, no longer hiding or sneaking. Her body was still coated in mud and plant compounds, but she moved with confidence. She passed 3 different stalker packs, 2 razorwing nests, and a ground shaker that was large enough to crush her with one footstep. None of them attacked her. The stalkers acknowledged her presence with brief scent checks, then moved on. The razorwings ignored her completely. The ground shaker looked at her with mild curiosity before returning to its grazing. She reached the extraction point with 6 hours to spare. The clearing was exactly as described in the briefing, a circular area kept clear of vegetation by automated systems. Laura stood in the center and looked around at the jungle that had been her home for 3 days. The juvenile stalker had followed her. It sat at the edge of the clearing, watching her with intelligent eyes. Laura smiled at it. "Thank you," she said, "for teaching me your language." She pulled out her recording device one final time. "Final observations," she said. "I have survived 72 hours in the Crothak Preserve using techniques developed by my species over 200,000 years of evolution. No advanced technology. No enhanced genetics. Just observation, adaptation, and the willingness to become part of the ecosystem instead of fighting it." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "My grandfather told me that the jungle talks if you listen. He was right. This preserve has been talking the entire time. It has been telling every candidate the same thing: adapt or die. I chose to adapt. I chose to listen. And that made all the difference." Laura activated her emergency beacon. Not because she was in danger, but because her time was complete. The extraction sphere descended from orbit, its engines scattering the jungle birds. The juvenile stalker retreated to a safe distance but did not flee entirely. It watched as Laura gathered her samples and prepared to leave. As the sphere's door opened, Laura looked back one last time. The jungle was beautiful in the afternoon light, alive with sounds and movement. It had tried to kill her for 3 days. But it had also taught her more about ecology, adaptation, and survival than any textbook ever could. She stepped into the sphere, her pack heavy with scientific data, her body exhausted but uninjured. The door sealed behind her, and the sphere began its ascent. Through the transparent walls, Laura watched the Crothak Preserve shrink below her. The juvenile stalker sat in the clearing watching her go. Laura pressed her hand against the window. "Goodbye," she whispered. "And thank you for letting me survive in your home." The sphere accelerated toward orbit, carrying Laura Hayes back to the Galactic Council. Back to questions and explanations. Back to a galaxy that was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or warfare. It was the ancient ability to adapt, to integrate, to become part of any environment they encountered. An ability born in Earth's jungles millions of years ago and proven once again in an alien preserve designed to kill anything that entered it. Laura had survived. And in doing so she had changed everything. The extraction sphere docked with the orbital station with a soft metallic clang. Laura stood inside, still covered in dried mud and plant matter, her pack slung over one shoulder. Through the viewing port she could see the docking bay filling with council members, military observers, xenobiologists, and medical teams. They had come to witness something that should have been impossible. The door opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Laura stepped out into the sterile light of the station, and the entire bay fell silent. She looked like something that had crawled out of the earth itself. The mud coating her skin had cracked and dried in intricate patterns. Bits of leaves and plant material were tangled in her hair. Her clothes were torn and stained with a dozen different colors from the jungle's vegetation. But her eyes were clear and bright, and she walked with steady confidence toward the assembled council. High Adjudicator Thane stepped forward, his mantis-like form towering over her. "Dr. Hayes," he said, and his translator carried a tone that might have been respect. "Medical scan, if you please." Laura stood still while the scanning beams washed over her. The holographic display appeared in the air beside her, showing her vital signs, injury assessment, and biological status in glowing detail. The medical technician stared at the results, then checked them again as if unable to believe what he was seeing. "No injuries," he announced. "Minor dehydration. Slight muscle fatigue. But no wounds, no infections, no trauma of any kind." He looked up at Laura with something like awe. "She is healthier than when she entered the preserve." A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Ambassador Preston pushed his way to the front, his face showing relief and pride in equal measure. Laura, how? Laura carefully lowered her pack to the floor and pulled out her recording device. I documented everything, she said. But the short answer is simple. I did not fight the jungle. I became part of it. General Corthin crossed his forearms, his expression skeptical. Explain. We watched you survive encounters with multiple apex predators. Creatures that killed trained warriors in minutes. Yet they ignored you completely. How is this possible without advanced technology or combat training? Laura knelt and opened her pack, pulling out sample containers filled with plants, mud, and carefully labeled specimens. My grandfather Walter served in Earth's Vietnam conflict in the 20th century. He spent 2 years behind enemy lines in some of the deadliest jungle on our planet. He survived by learning a simple truth: you cannot conquer nature. You can only understand it and work with it. She held up a container with the waxy-leafed plants. These contain alkaloid compounds that predators instinctively avoid. I used them to create a chemical camouflage. Not visual camouflage. Scent camouflage. To every predator in that preserve I smelled like poison. Like something not worth eating. A xenobiologist, the jellyfish-like Vel, pulsed with excited light. Chemical mimicry. You made yourself smell like toxic flora. Partly, Laura agreed. But it was more than that. I also studied the predators' territorial behaviors. They marked their territories with specific scent compounds. I collected mud from these markers and mixed it with the plant compounds. I made myself smell like I belonged to their territory, not as prey, as environment, as part of the landscape they protect. She pulled out another container, this one filled with different mud samples. This is from a void stalker den. This is from a razor wing nesting area. This is from a ground shaker migration path. Each one carries the chemical signature of the creatures that live there. By coating myself in these scents, I could move through the preserve using the predator's own communication system. Thane leaned closer, examining the samples. You learned their language. Not verbal language. Chemical language. Exactly, Laura said. And once I could speak their language, they stopped seeing me as a threat or as food. A juvenile stalker even started following me. It treated me like a strange but harmless part of its territory. The observation bay erupted in conversation. Military strategists were already discussing implications. Xenobiologists were requesting samples for analysis. Council members were arguing about what this meant for the trial results. Corthin raised his voice above the chaos. This is irrelevant. The trial tests combat effectiveness. Survival capability in hostile environments. Not playing with plants and mud like a primitive. Laura turned to face him directly. General, with respect, that is exactly why 217 candidates died. They approached the preserve as a combat scenario. Every weapon they fired, every shield they activated, every aggressive action they took marked them as threats. And the preserve responded by eliminating them. She gestured to her recording device. I found the remains of at least 15 candidates during my time in the preserve. Every single one died the same way. They fought. And fighting triggered a response from every predator in range. The jungle does not care how advanced your technology is. It does not care how strong you are. It only cares whether you are a threat. And if you are, it will kill you. Ambassador Preston was nodding slowly. But you were not a threat. You were part of the ecosystem. Yes, Laura confirmed. I survived the same way humans survived on Earth for 200,000 years before we developed technology. By understanding our environment. By adapting to it instead of trying to dominate it. By learning to read the signs that nature provides and responding appropriately. Thane was silent for a long moment, processing this information. Finally he spoke. You have scientific data? Documentation of your methods? Laura handed him the recording device. 72 hours of observations. Predator behavior patterns. Plant chemical analyses. Territorial mapping. Social hierarchy documentation. Everything I learned about the Krothak Preserve's ecosystem. She smiled slightly. I may have been fighting for my life, but I am still a scientist. I could not help but collect data. Vel pulsed with light. This is revolutionary. We have studied the preserve for decades, but only from orbit or through drone footage. You have first-hand ecological data from inside the ecosystem. This alone would justify council membership. But there is more, Thane said slowly. Dr. Hayes has demonstrated a survival capability that none of us anticipated. Not through superior strength or technology, but through adaptation. Through integration. This changes our understanding of what makes a species viable for council membership. He turned to address the assembled council members. For centuries, we have tested candidates based on their ability to dominate hostile environments, to fight and overcome challenges through force. Dr. Hayes has shown us a different path. The path of understanding, of cooperation with the environment rather than conquest of it. Corthin still looked unconvinced. This is one human, one success. It proves nothing about the species as a whole. Actually, Laura interjected, it proves everything about my species. These techniques are not unique to me. They are ancient knowledge passed down through generations. Indigenous peoples on Earth have used similar methods for thousands of years. Hunters, trackers, survivalists. My grandfather learned from Vietnamese guides who had survived in those jungles for their entire lives. This is human heritage. Human wisdom that predates our technology by millennia. She pulled out one more item from her pack. A small, worn notebook with a cracked leather cover. This is Walter's field journal. He wrote down everything he learned during his time in the jungle. How to read animal tracks. How to identify edible plants. How to move through hostile territory without being detected. How to survive when you have nothing but your mind and your understanding of nature. Laura held the journal up for everyone to see. This book is over 100 years old. The knowledge in it is thousands of years old. And it saved my life in a jungle on the other side of the galaxy. That is what humanity brings to the Galactic Council. Not just technology or military strength, but an ancient, deep understanding of how to survive by working with nature instead of against it. The council chamber fell silent again. Thane looked at the journal, then at Laura, then at the sample she had brought back. Finally, he turned to the council members. I call for a vote, he announced. Dr. Laura Hayes has survived the Predator trial for the full 72 hours with no assistance, no injuries, and extensive scientific documentation of her methods. Furthermore, she has demonstrated a survival philosophy that challenges our fundamental assumptions about environmental adaptation. The question before us: does humanity pass the Predator trial and earn full council membership? The vote was unanimous. Every council member, even Corthin, voted in favor. Humanity is granted full membership in the Galactic Council, Thane declared. With the highest marks ever recorded in the Predator trial. Dr. Hayes, your species has proven that there are many paths to survival. Yours may be the wisest of all. Laura felt tears sting her eyes. She looked down at Walter's journal, running her fingers over the worn cover. Thank you, Grandpa, she whispered. Ambassador Preston stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. What happens now? Thane answered before Laura could speak. Now, Dr. Hayes becomes the director of the new Galactic Ecological Integration Institute. Her methods will be studied and taught throughout the council. The Krothak Preserve will be converted from a trial ground to a research facility. And humanity's ancient survival wisdom becomes part of our collective knowledge. Laura looked up at him. I have one request. Name it. The Predator trial needs to change. No more deaths. No more sending candidates into that jungle to die. Use it to teach instead. To help species understand their environment rather than conquer it. Thane's mandibles clicked in agreement. It will be done. The trial will become an educational program. And you will design the curriculum. 3 months later, Laura stood in a lecture hall filled with military strategists from 40 different species. Walter's survival manual had been translated into every council language and was now required reading at all military academies. The Krothak Preserve had been renamed the Hayes Ecological Research Center. Laura finished her presentation and looked out at her audience. Remember, she said, strength is not always about domination. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is adapt. Listen. Become part of the world around you instead of fighting it. My species learned this lesson millions of years ago, in jungles and forests and deserts across Earth. Now I am sharing it with all of you. That night, Laura visited the memorial garden on the council station. She placed Walter's journal in a protective case beneath a small monument. The inscription read, "To Walter Hayes, who taught humanity that the jungle talks if you listen. His wisdom saved one human life and changed an entire galaxy." Laura touched the monument and smiled. The jungle talked, Grandpa. And I listened. Just like you taught me.